Welcome to the Cashflow Ninja, the podcast sharing how to create and grow income streams and manage, multiply, and protect your wealth in the new economy. Are you tired of trading your time for money? Do you desire freedom today instead of retirement in 10, 20, or 30 years? I'm MC Laubscher, and this is the Cashflow Ninja. This is Cashflow Ninja. I'm MC Laubscher. Thank you so much for joining me in another episode of Cashflow Ninja. I've got a great show for you with a fantastic guest. I've been following her work for a long time because she covers really important issues, and one particular issue that not a lot of people have spoken about, but it's starting to get a little bit of legs more out there mainstream. So her name is Kristin B. Tate. She is the author of two fantastic books, Government Gone Wild, How DC Politicians Are Taking You for a Ride. And also her new book is called The Liberal Invasion of Red State America. Kristin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So for our viewers and listeners there that's not familiar with you and your background, can you share a little bit about your journey and your background with them?
Sure. I grew up in New Hampshire, practically off the grid. My family was not overtly political, but we were very hardworking people. My town is a very hardworking little town, so I kind of got those values ingrained in me from a very young age. You know, if you want something up in rural New Hampshire, you've got to work for it. So I went to college in Boston and was sort of inundated with this kind of liberal mindset of the students there. And I thought I wanted to go work in advertising, and just by mistake, I kind of fell into this journalism world. So right after college, I got a job working for Breitbart News. I was sent down to Texas, which is where I live now, to be an editor for the Texas vertical of the site. I got years of experience on the U.S.-Mexico border, covering mostly immigration, which was a fantastic experience for me. But then after a few years of that, I thought, you know, what I really want to do is I want to shape millennial thought. And I want to show millennials why this liberalism that they're flocking to is actually destroying their futures. How can I do that? That's when I wrote Government Gone Wild, which is really supposed to be a libertarian manifesto for young people and kind of get them interested in these issues like fiscal responsibility, like tax policy. And I started writing for The Hill newspaper, which is in Washington, D.C., started doing more media, Fox News, that kind of thing. In your intro, you actually missed my second book. I wrote another book called How Do I Tax Thee? That's
there you go.
That's a book that exposes all kinds of taxes that we are hit with that is not the income tax. So that was my second project. Because, you know, so often when we talk about tax policy, we focus on income tax, but income taxes actually make up less than half of our personal tax burdens. So that was my second project. And then my third project was my most recent book, The Liberal Invasion of Red State America. I moved back down to Texas recently, which is ground zero for the domestic migration trends that I cover in that book. And here we are today. I'm still covering this domestic migration topic. I'm happy to say finally receiving more coverage, but it's a trend that's been going on for many years.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I'm very excited to get into this, because it's so important, you know, for investors and business owners out there to understand the environment in which they operate, and also see the changes and the trends coming in, and be even aware of things that they might not pay attention to. Like you said, how do I tax thee? I don't think people, and let's just touch on that, because that is something I think that's very important too. The biggest wealth destroyer, bar none, out there is taxes. And if you don't pay attention to it, which not a lot of people do, you will end up on the wrong side of that. So most people are not familiar that they, or maybe even aware of, they know of, well, I'm paying state tax, I'm probably paying property taxes if I'm home, I'm paying federal income tax. But just talk a little bit about all the other taxes and what it amounts to, because it's quite staggering.
Sure. I mean, pretty much the only thing you do that is not taxed is breathing. Every time you go on a plane, every time you eat at a restaurant, every time you go to a movie theater, anytime you practically do anything, you are paying taxes in one form or another. So the book really, How Do I Tax Me, exposes all of these different ways that our money is being funneled to federal, state, and local governments. And when you add up all of these taxes, so income taxes, all kinds of consumer taxes, what I call indirect taxation, which is when you pay higher fees to subsidize taxes on businesses, when you add all of these up, it turns out that more than half of our incomes are typically going to various government coffers. So people need to be aware of this. I call a lot of these taxes hidden taxes because it's basically a way for governments, especially state governments, to collect tax revenue without doing the politically unpopular thing of putting a formal new tax up for a vote. So for example, it's much easier to say, instead of telling our constituents that we're going to formally institute a new tax, why don't we just slap a fee onto whatever it is, onto plastic bottles? And that's essentially a tax, but then they don't have the political stigma of technically raising taxes. So people need to be aware of this, and it really highlights the importance of your local and state government, because we often think that it's the federal government that is taxing us so much. And yes, they are, but your state and local government is doing it too, and often getting away with it with no political blowback whatsoever.
Yeah, it's just snuck in there. And if you really drill down to it, like you said, it is just incredible.
And some of it's really infuriating. I'll give you an example. And these sort of seem like little things, but it all adds up. They give these fees important sounding names. Like here in Houston, when you go to the dog pound and you adopt a dog, you pay what's called an adoption fee, or I think it's called the pound fee or something. It's some fee that you pay that you're led to believe goes to helping dogs, right? Well, it turns out this fee literally just goes to the general fund of the city. It's literally a tax for adopting an animal that has nothing to do with actually going to help other animals. So they give these taxes these important sounding names so you feel good about paying them, like, oh, my money is going to this or that, when really it's just going to the general fund and paying for bloated pensions and administrator salaries.
It's quite incredible, and the reason why this is also so important is we'll talk on and get into the meat of our discussion here. But this is an accelerating trend. This isn't something that they've ever taken a step back on and said, whoa, hang on a second. Well, we've got all these different types of little taxes and fees. Let's just take a step back and let's eliminate this. It doesn't seem that ever happens.
Government only grows, and the politicians and officials love these hidden taxes because, again, it lets them collect that revenue without doing the politically unpopular and honest thing by actually raising taxes. I hate taxes, but if you're going to tax me, at least call it what it is. Call it a tax. Don't just hit me with 100 fees and then claim you never raised taxes, because the end result is the same.
Absolutely. So the big trend that I've been keeping an eye on, and I know a lot of real estate investors are on top of it because they just look at data to figure out how to position themselves, is the mass migration trend in the United States, and it's an enormous trend. I think one of the biggest migrations in the history of the country, if I'm not mistaken. And this is the reason why it caught my attention, beside being a business owner or investor, is it will impact demographics. It'll impact the political situation in these states. It'll impact the taxes, regulations. I mean, it really hits small businesses. What's happening? Where are people? Why are people moving? And where are people moving to? Share a little bit more on that.
So domestic migration is really significantly shaping the political map, basically right under our noses. Republicans tend to focus very, very much on immigration to the United States. And while certainly immigration is an important political topic, they're not focused on what's actually having an impact on real elections very quickly, which is this domestic migration trend. So what's happening is people are fleeing high tax blue states in favor of low tax red states. And the trends are happening so significantly that New York and California are expected to lose congressional seats because of population declines, while Texas and Florida are growing so quickly that they're actually going to gain congressional seats. The job market is so good. And by the way, this is all, I'm talking about everything before COVID. So before COVID, the job market was so good down here in Texas that we didn't have enough people to fill the jobs. I mean, there's literally a state program here in Texas that exists to attract workers from other states, primarily California, because we just have such booming corporate growth here that we need people to move down here. Now, all of these trends are pretty vindicating to conservative thinkers like me and to people who are Republicans, because it proves that your low tax sort of way of governing creates economic growth, and it attracts businesses, it attracts people. So people are coming down here, but on the other hand, these trends are having really significant political ramifications, because what ends up happening is people will leave these high tax blue states, come to Texas or Florida or Oklahoma or Utah for good paying jobs, and then they just vote in favor of the same policies that caused the devastation in the places they fled.
Yeah, and that was going to be one of my questions. What are some of the things that you would say are or policies that some of these states, let's just say California, New York, Illinois, and New Jersey, what are some of the policies that are in there that have just completely made it unsustainable for a lot of folks to live there and stay there, and have really reached their breaking point to leave?
Oh, I mean, if you are a family, if you have children, why in the world would you live in New York City or Chicago if you don't have to? I mean, to afford even a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment in New York City is insane. It's insane. For a one bedroom apartment in Manhattan, I believe the average rent is over $3,000 a month. So if you want 2 or 3 bedrooms, you're looking at far more than that. Every time you buy a coffee or buy lunch or buy dinner in New York City, you're looking at inflated prices and huge amounts of taxes. Your income taxes will be ballooned in these blue state cities because you're paying exorbitant local city taxes, state taxes, and then of course you have the federal tax. And then for a lot of high income earners, the removal of SALT deductions, or not the removal, but the capping of SALT deductions at $10,000 was also a big blow to them, because now they cannot deduct those exorbitant state and local taxes from their federal taxes. So it's kind of a perfect storm. And then of course, on top of the expenses, you just have crime rates, which are going up. You have failing public school systems in a lot of these places. You're seeing a shift in corporate growth from blue states to red states. So it's really the perfect storm that's creating this exodus. And now that COVID has hit, I think a lot of big companies are realizing, hey, we don't need a footprint in Manhattan. Why are we paying for this big skyscraper in Manhattan? Most of our employees can work remotely. We remove the liability, frankly, of being in New York, where you have all this uncertainty right now. You have riots in the streets. Banking does not even need to be done in New York anymore. I mean, traditionally, New York has been the capital of banking in this country. Why does that need to be? I mean, people are finally realizing, hey, we don't need to be here. So COVID and the recent changes we're seeing, I think, will only speed up this exodus. But certainly before COVID, this was already happening, primarily because the cost of living is high, the schools are terrible, crime is on the rise, and the exciting job opportunities for middle income earners tend to be in these red states where you're seeing more corporate growth.
Yeah, one of the things that I'll just add to that, even before the pandemic, a state like New York, and one of my businesses is in the insurance space, there's actually carriers that have pulled out of the state and not conducting a business in there, because it became almost impossible for them to do it with all the regulatory regulations and laws and this, and the red tape was so much that certain carriers started saying, this is just too much. We can't profitable do business in here, which is the goal of every business, because those profits can then be reinvested in the company to grow it, create more jobs, and so forth. So there's a lot. Even before this happened, we saw people were just leaving certain states and moving from certain states. There's also in the real estate industry a very large real estate investor that left California and moved down to Florida, for example, and he was just by math stating how much, it's literally a bonus that he was giving himself and his company.
Huge.
Savings.
And I would just add to that, it's not just high earners who are getting a bonus when they leave New York or New Jersey. It's middle income earners as well, especially, I would say especially middle income earners, because if you're making $100,000 a year and you have 2 kids to feed, and all of a sudden you don't have to pay state and local taxes, that right there is a 12% bonus, because that's 12% of your income you're no longer paying to the state and local government.
CAMAPLAN is one of the leaders for personalized tax-deferred and tax-free IRA planning. CAMAPLAN's team can assist you to take control of your retirement funds and financial future through self-directed investing. They offer support to clients throughout the entire process, from opening your first account to making your first purchase to self-managing your assets. CAMAPLAN works with a growing network of investment providers in all asset categories and offer free investor education through classes, events, and webinars with over 15 years of leadership and self-directed retirement investing. CAMAPLAN will help you unlock a convenient and safe way to manage your retirement investments and discover financial freedom beyond traditional investments, beyond Wall Street, and go from forever taxed to never taxed. Start to take control over your retirement funds and financial future today by visiting cashflowninja.com/CAMAPLAN.
Right. And the other thing that I find interesting, and maybe you want to comment on that too before we jump into the COVID part of it too, is that some states, which is very, very interesting too, some states don't have income taxes, but then they sometimes make up for it with other heavier, other taxes. They hit you another way. They come at you from a different angle. Again, like you said, it would be more honest just if you said, hey, here's the amount of taxes that you're going to pay. So when you do your research, a lot of folks tend to go first at the zero income states, but there's actually, if you look around, and I just played around and looked at a couple of different things, and I'd love to hear your comment on this, that there's many different variables to take into consideration, correct?
Of course, you have to look at property taxes, and people think, oh, well, I can escape property taxes by renting. Well, of course, the property taxes get passed down to renters, right? My father's a landlord, and he always says, when they increase my property taxes, I increase rent. So yes, of course, there are many factors, many different kinds of taxes that you need to look at. What I would say is look at spending at the state and local level, and look at total revenue collected by these governments, because that will really tell you how much you will probably be paying. And look at the pensions and the total spending on salaries to support the local and state government salaries. That'll give you a pretty good idea of whether or not your state or city's fiscal house is in order. But you're absolutely right that we cannot just look at income tax. But I do think, income tax is a good way to kind of gauge just off the top how much money your family will spend every month in your paycheck, before you take into account obviously consumer taxes and property taxes. And there's absolutely no question that a place like Texas or Florida will let you save a significant chunk of money just off the bat by removing those taxes. But you're right, there are other ways they can and do get you.
Yeah. So then we had the pandemic, and obviously the nation, I mean, every 4 years it's divided already. Every 4 years, 50% of the country seems to hate the other 50 and vice versa. So it was already positioned to be a crazy year. It even got crazier. And the virus and the pandemic is one thing. Then the reaction to it and how states independently handled it became a topic which a lot of people were either very upset about. It seems the general one is nobody's happy in any regards with where they are, of how it was treated. But now you had the remote working trends, which you alluded to earlier. People don't have to live in places anymore if they don't need to, because things are happening in other places now. Twitter has already said people can work remote, so you have remote working. The highly densely populated areas, of course, people are going to look at that and say, do I really want to live in New York City after just what happened, or the other close big city to where I'm at? Those are just some things that I'm seeing your comment on that, and things that are happening that is accelerating this trend that was in full motion before this pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, COVID is, for a lot of people, what made them finally pull the trigger. You know, a lot of people were already thinking they wanted to leave these places, and then COVID just, you know, was what did it for them. Not only that, but a lot of people I know personally have been wanting to leave New York for a very long time. They just haven't been able to because they need to be at an office and their job is in New York. Well, now they're working remotely. They haven't been in New York for months. They've been hiding out in Florida or wherever they are. And a lot of these companies are saying, hey, you know what? Keep working remotely. It's fine with us. And then on top of COVID, you have these protests, you have this movement to defund the police. So there are a lot of people out there, especially people with kids and families, who are saying, you know what? I want nothing to do with these big cities anymore. I've been enjoying the last few months living in a more quiet area. Let's just stay out here. A little microcosm of that is my folks live up in New Hampshire. And New Hampshire in the past few months has seen this huge rush of people from Boston leaving the city and going up to New Hampshire. And a lot of them are planning on staying up there. Boston had a very large COVID outbreak for some reason. I think because it's a colder environment. So, you know, this spring, the virus was spreading very quickly up there because it was cold. Apparently hot air helps to kill the virus. So, New Hampshire just absorbed this huge number of Boston refugees. And I'm a bit concerned about that because a lot of these Bostonians plan on staying up there, and it could actually really impact the political environment of New Hampshire. New Hampshire is a very small state. Our motto up there is live free or die. We have no sales tax. We have no income tax. It's already been a state that is trending blue. We have a fully Democratic state legislature. The only Republican we have left is a governor. So with such a small population, all it takes is one batch of Bostonians moving up there to really do some real damage. And I think in the next decade, New Hampshire will have either a state income tax or a sales tax, because these liberals move up there and they want all these government programs. They want all of these various things, and you need revenue to pay for it. So COVID has definitely sped up the rate of migration out of blue states. And I mean, I really think this is just going to continue for the next year, and we're not really going to know the impact of this fully until we're on the other side, until we're done with COVID, and you know, these city governments can assess what's happened to their population. But New York was already getting hit with it really badly. I remember in 2019, the governor announced, I think it was a $2.6 billion hole in the state budget because more people had left than they thought would leave. So, you know, they're planning their budgets based on a number of people living there. But if people are fleeing at a quicker rate than expected, they're spending more than they're taking in. And that's a recipe for disaster. And that's why we're seeing already a lot of these blue states starting to request federal bailouts. I mean, that's a whole other topic, but I think we're going to see more of that. More of these blue states, as their tax-paying base is hollowed out, are going to want federal money to bail them out.
Yeah, and it's a great point what you bring up, that the people leaving, it's not factored in. I believe it was New Jersey where there was a massive hedge fund player, and I'm drawing a blank now exactly who it was, that left and went to Florida.
Florida.
Yeah, and
I wrote about him in my book. Yeah,
Yep.
New Jersey lost like 3% or something of its entire tax revenue from this one guy, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually quite a bit. From one person. That's one person. So
yeah. And if you do a Google search, famous Florida residents or something like that, or I'm just using that as an example, you'd be surprised. A lot of people that think that they reside or they're residents of New York or California, they are not technically in legal residents of that state. They actually reside somewhere else, which I found was very, very interesting too. Because there's certain celebrities that you would associate even with, like a New York, for example.
Oh, you'd be a fool to stay in New York.
Yeah.
There's this idea that like, I used to have it like, I want to be a part of New York. I want to be a part of the New York experience. And it's exciting and you feel like you're part of this big, exciting world. And it's this idea that I think is being more and more weakened as New York's economy starts to die this slow death, as the real power makers leave the city, as the high earners flee, as the celebrities leave, that sort of state of mind that keeps so many middle income earners there and convinces them to give up so much to be a part of this New York experience, that's really going to be hard. And what's really sad about it, and I've written about this a lot in my column at The Hill, is the high income earners, they're going to be fine. They're going to Florida. They're going to be all set. The middle income earners will follow them. We're already seeing that happen. You know who's going to get hurt the worst from all of this? It's the low income earners and the poor who cannot afford to just pick up and move. The programs that these people rely on are funded by tax dollars. That tax-paying base is leaving. So these programs are either going to shrink or they're going to be reliant on a federal bailout. Meanwhile, this defund the police movement is sweeping these big cities. So crime-ridden areas where poor families tend to live may not be as well protected. So the unfortunate result of all of this is not only political shifts in the receiving states that are becoming more blue now, but it's actually the low-income earners who are stuck in these blue states that are becoming hellscapes. And a lot of people don't realize that because they are, not seeing it firsthand because they have the means to pick up and leave.
Yep, it's most definitely it's the those people that will get hit the hardest, unfortunately, and even a lot of the employers with them leaving too, right? It's now all of a sudden, because you can now hire people in most companies from anywhere. They don't have to actually physically live close to your company. So
why would you be in New York? If you were a business owner, why would you be in New York? There is no upside. The answer to that used to be, prestige, or I'm able to tap into a high quality population of workers.
Investors, don't sleep on this market and trends. Did you know that in many cities across the U.S., renters now outnumber owners, and demand will only increase? More and more will be renting in droves, and it's putting the squeeze on a tight rental market. Four Peaks Capital Partners has been successfully investing in this proven, recession-resistant sector for years, providing investors with passive income and capital appreciation. Protect your portfolio and invest in private real estate funds because the demand for affordable housing will only increase. Invest with Four Peaks and let us do all the work. Find out more by calling 8775-INCOME. That's 8775-INCOME. Or visit privateincomeinvesting.com. That's privateincomeinvesting.com.
Well, the high-quality workers are leaving New York. The prestige of New York is being chipped away. So what other reason is there to be there? And if you have a retail business, the liability of being in New York, forget about the costs for a second, just the liability of having a storefront in a big city right now is terrifying for a lot of business owners and capital. So it's no surprise that we're seeing this happen.
Yeah, the cost of opening back up for these businesses with all the new regulations and red tape that they will have too is going to be devastating for a lot of businesses.
Oh, it's horrible. My stepmother owns restaurants in Boston.
Mhm.
And it's a Mexican themed restaurant. They sell burritos for $7 each. And you need to sell a lot of burritos to pay rent in the middle of Boston and Cambridge. Her other
Yep.
locations are in Cambridge. I mean, she has prime locations. The rent is exorbitant. And there are several dozen employees that rely on these restaurants for their income to support their families. Well, for the last almost 3 months now, Boston has forced her and other business owners and restaurant owners to be completely closed besides delivery. I mean, you're not going to be able to make money delivering $7 burritos, right? Because the cost to pay a delivery man to deliver the burritos is more than you're making in revenue.
Yep.
So she and others have been so harmed by this. They're finally allowed now to do outdoor dining, but I mean, she doesn't have an outdoor patio space, nor do many other business owners. So she's been paying her employees, but she's had to tap into her savings. She has zero savings left. There are many other restaurant owners on her streets who have had to close permanently. I mean, these are beloved businesses in the community, restaurants that have been there for decades in some cases. And it's just so sad. It's so sad what's happening. And the PPP loans given out by the federal government were slow to be dispersed. Many people didn't even get them.
Yep.
My stepmother was told that she was receiving some loan money. And, the way the loans work is if you retain the size of your workforce, the loan essentially becomes a grant.
Yes.
Well, after a week or two, she got another letter from the federal government saying, well, we've assessed your assets. And because you have too many assets, you have too much savings, you have to actually pay this loan back, regardless of whether or not you keep your workforce. So they're literally punishing businesses that have saved money to have savings and rewarding the businesses that don't have savings by allowing those businesses to take the loans as grants. I mean, the whole system, it's just so messed up. We need to let businesses reopen responsibly. Thankfully, Texas is mostly reopened now, but my stepmother up in Boston and many like her are really, really hurting still.
Yeah, and that ties into the government spending, which you've written about too. I mean, it's just I don't know how much they will have to throw at this. I don't see it stopping at any time because it's just you literally switched off the entire economy globally, and it's when you turn it back on, it's just not going to keep going as it went before. So we're already looking at the markets, which the things that we're seeing already with all the money thrown at it is just things that you couldn't even dream up. You have bankrupt companies who is doubling stocks in the stock market. And obviously, there's been checks sent directly to folks. There's been these programs for businesses, but the money from the federal and eventually the state. I mean, it's just, maybe I'm almost speechless if I think about the amount that they're going to need just to be able to sustain this and extend the runway for a lot of folks.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying desperately to print money and print our way out of this horrible situation. It is not going to end well. We've got to reopen the economy. Another problem with these payouts is that, I'm sure you've read this, a lot of the payouts are more, the funds are more than what people are making at low income jobs. So what incentive is there for people to actually get back to work if they make more not working?
Yep.
It's totally perverse incentives. I know your show's more of a business show, not as much as a political show, but I'm worried that a lot of this is politically motivated. There seem to be a lot of people in this country, a lot of politicians and a lot of folks in the media who would like to see the economy shut down as long as possible because it's politically beneficial to them. But real people's livelihoods are at stake here. People are losing everything. It's so sad. And, I pray that we can get through this, but we're not going to be able to print our way out of the situation. The answer is not more government, it's more commerce. Another interesting thing that I've been writing about too is that during these times of crises, as the private sector shrinks and contracts and bleeds jobs, what we see is, in fact, the public jobs force, the public sector always balloons. So, as the market is shrinking the number of jobs in the private sector, we've actually seen the federal workforce grow substantially during COVID.
Yep.
And that's going to have long-term impacts. I mean, we're basically shrinking the private sector in order to grow the public sector. Therefore, just ballooning government even more, ballooning government dependency, ballooning the government jobs force. So it'll definitely have some long-term consequences on the way this country operates. And unfortunately, a lot of people's livelihoods have been completely destroyed in the process.
Yeah, it most certainly have, and I think, and maybe we'll take a look at the impact of all of this, because I think you're going to have to brace for impact, because all of the spending you'd mentioned earlier, that pensions, for example, and that crisis is something that we've been following too, and looked at very, very carefully, because there's a lot of underfunded pensions in the United States and globally, all over the world. It's another one of those things that, the money just isn't there. They just didn't plan for it. It was a failed model. And of course, there was a lot of shenanigans and deals cut behind the scene and so forth, as there always are. So you've got that big time bomb ready to explode. You've got all of this massive, massive spending. And there's no such thing as free money or free this or free anything for that matter. Somebody's paying for it. So the options on the table, what we usually say to folks is, well, what are they going to do? So can they reduce spending significantly, balance budgets, and grow the economy to such an extent that we're just going to magically get rid of this? Or are they going to raise taxes? Because that seems to be the only thing that they've done previously. And we always say, well, you can't predict the future, but the only thing that you can predict is by looking at the past and looking at the previous behaviors, right?
Right. Well, I can almost guarantee you they're going to raise taxes. Unfortunately, in this country, it's usually middle income and upper income people who have the unfortunate effects of these policies. So people who are super wealthy, they're going to be fine. They find ways to avoid taxes. People who are dependent on government, they're going to be fine. It's the people who are doing the right thing and paying their taxes and scraping to get by. Those are the folks that are going to be harmed with increased taxes. We're going to probably be seeing a lot of requests for bailouts. We've already seen them, but expect that to increase. So that means that taxpayers in fiscally responsible states with smaller bureaucracies are going to be subsidizing the bloated, irresponsible spending in places like Illinois, California, New York, Massachusetts. So expect to see that to continue. But, just on an individual level, all of us as individuals, we should not expect anything. We shouldn't expect to see, I don't expect to see any Social Security when I'm older. I'm going to save, and I tell every millennial to do the same. And not even millennials, everyone, baby boomers at this point, everyone should be saving as much money as they can. Just put away as much money as you possibly can, because we could be heading into some very uncertain times. So I think at this point, it's kind of like every man for himself. Just try to make as much money as you can and sock it away. Sock it away. Unfortunately, my generation is very financially illiterate. They don't even teach you how to balance a checkbook in public schools these days. They don't teach you basic finance. That's education that happens in the household. But you'd be surprised. I mean, so many of my friends in their 20s and early 30s are making pretty good salaries, and they go through they are living paycheck to paycheck. I know people making $120,000 a year who are living paycheck to paycheck because the over availability of credit has allowed these people to get these insanely expensive luxury cars. They're living in these beautiful apartments. They have everything financed. Their furniture is financed. I mean, everything's financed. So they are living way above their means. Meanwhile, they are just buried in student debt. And these kids need to understand the government's not going to swoop in and save you. We need to be saving our money as individuals. So that's another message I've been desperately trying to get out to my peers.
Yeah, it's so true, and that's our mission here too, is trying to wake people up, trying to warn them, trying to educate them, and share all these different strategies and things that you weren't taught at school, or nor university, or even MBA or postgrad degrees, so that you have the necessary skills to see what's coming, prepare for it, and also, if there's an oncoming train coming down that track, the first thing is to get clarity and get off the track, and then figure it out. So, and the reason why the migration is so important, the government spending is so important, and all these other things is so important, is we're going to have to operate in this environment. To your point earlier, the people that are responsible and doing the right things, if they don't necessarily have a strategy for a chaotic environment that we're going into, they stand the chance of being harmed in the process as well.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The 10 fastest growing states last year were all low tax states.
We are living through unprecedented times, and many experts say that in the coming months and years, we're about to see some of the best real estate opportunities of our lifetime. Who's going to benefit the most from these opportunities? Those with access to capital, which is where the Real Estate Accelerator comes in. Brought to you by Good Egg Investments, the Real Estate Accelerator is an online course and mastermind that will give you everything you need to raise private capital for real estate syndications. Through building a killer brand that attracts the right investors, you'll be able to take advantage of the upcoming opportunities and scale your business. To learn more, check out cashflowninja.com/goodegg.
These states are just booming in population, and all of these same 10 states are trending to the left. They are all increasingly becoming left wing. Now, I know you don't have this is more of a business show, but it relates to business, because as these states move to the left, they are more likely to put in place higher taxes, restrictive regulations that strangle corporate growth. So these are all things we need to think about. This is all, just because you live in a state that right now doesn't have an income tax, that right now has high corporate growth, this is a very fluid situation, especially with COVID. So as these states like Texas, like Florida, absorb record numbers of people from blue states, expect the political environments in these states to change. I'll give you a perfect example. Texas has long been considered a very reliably conservative state. Right now, as of today, Joe Biden and Donald Trump are almost tied in the polls in Texas. I mean, right now, Texas has almost identical demographics to California in 1990. People don't realize this. My generation forgets this. California used to be a reliably red conservative state, but now, of course, it is completely Democratic. The taxes are totally high. They hate corporations, and it's a terrible place to grow a business. But it used to be very conservative. And then in the 1990s, it totally switched. And now, it's had a streak of presidential wins for Democrats there. Texas today is in that same exact position. The demographics are almost identical. So we need to be aware of the changes happening. And we cannot take anything for granted. We cannot take, an environment that is conducive to corporate growth or personal investing for granted, because these situations are changing quickly. The political environments are very fluid, and a lot of reliably red states expect them to become purple quickly. It's happening very fast.
Absolutely, and that's a great point. So a big takeaway here too is, from a risk management standpoint, for a business owner or for an investor, we all know after 2008 and 2009 of institutional risk, because there were folks that shorted the market, but their money was with Bear Stearns or Lehman Brothers. They lost anyway. So people started paying attention with what institution their money is. Then most folks are familiar with market risk and minimizing risk in markets itself. Economic risk is another risk that's very, very important. But the one that most people completely forget about in the environment that we operate in is political risk. And you always have to be cognizant of this and aware of changes, aware of trends. And this is something that especially, and I know we have a large real estate listening audience, it's going to play into real estate trends, where people are moving to, where they're going to buy properties and rent, where they're going to work, where companies and businesses are moving to. So, regardless of political affiliation, you need to be aware of what's going on and where the puck is going, right? As Wayne Gretzky always said. One of the things, Kristin, is that I've seen with very successful folks such as yourself is they're always studying, they're always reading and researching. What are you studying and researching right now that is of interest?
So I'm actually a fellow right now at the Fund for American Studies, doing a fascinating study of the public sector workforce. So I've been studying trends in the government jobs growth we've seen over the past few decades, particularly the consulting class and contractors. And you would be amazed at some of the waste I have been uncovering. So that's what I've been very interested in. And COVID has really added an interesting twist to my research because I've always known that there's been sort of an inverse relationship between government and the market. But man, this has just highlighted that so much more because as COVID has really hit and hurt the private sector workforce, the public workforce has expanded. None of them have had their salaries cut. None of them have been laid off. None of their pensions are at risk. So, if you get laid off from your private sector job, maybe you should consider going and working for the federal government because you have insane job security, a great pension that you will not find in the private sector, and really great benefits. So that's what I'm studying right now. But outside of that, I'm an avid reader of historical nonfiction books. Right now, I'm working on the Napoleon biography by, I think his name's John Roberts. It's a fantastic read. I highly recommend that anyone who's interested in the political environment right now do some reading about the French Revolution because there are some interesting parallels there. But that's what I'm working on at the moment, and it's just a fascinating time to be working and writing in politics.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what an interesting time we're living in right now. Definitely not a boring time. 2020 was never going to be boring, but it's exceeded expectations by a long shot, and I think the ride is only about to get wilder as we finish summer up here. Now, core message in our show is to leave our families, communities, and the world better than we found it by passing down a mindset, values, and principles to future generations, not just money. So if you cannot pass on any money to future generations and we're only allowed to pass on 3 principles to them to build wealth and achieve happiness and success, what would they be?
I would say the principles to achieve happiness and success that I strive for, I'm not perfect and I haven't achieved these things fully yet, but are fiscal responsibility on a personal level, empathy and compassion for others who are not like yourself, having the ability to listen and learn and acknowledging that you are not always right, and having a zest for life and being willing to laugh and have fun, even in the worst of circumstances. It'll keep you healthy, it'll keep you happy. And those are the values that I strive for. I'm not perfect, I don't achieve them fully, but that's what I'm aiming for myself.
Fantastic. I love it. And trying to just build a bigger and better life, an amazing future every single day, one step at a time. So, really appreciate you coming on. Where can viewers and listeners learn more about you? Where can they follow you? Your Twitter feed is fantastic, but where can they stay informed of all of the many projects that you're involved with?
Thank you so much for having me. My Twitter handle is Kristin B. Tate, and Kristin is with 2 I's, so that's Kristin. And then my website is kristinbtate.com. So you can follow me on there. I update my followers on my work and my thoughts throughout the day. So Twitter is really the best way.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your journey and your knowledge and just providing so much value around all these very, very important topics. It's been a blast having you on.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, that is another show with the Cashflow Ninja. All of our previous episodes you can find at cashflowninja.com. And of course, we are all over all of the video platforms, all of the podcast platforms. You'll find us on the internet somewhere, but you can check out everything there. Appreciate everyone. And again, I look forward to our next show. But until then, live infinitely.
This presentation is for educational and informational purposes only. The information being presented and considered does not consider your particular financial objectives or situation, and it does not make personalized recommendations. This material is not intended to replace the advice of a qualified tax and legal advisor or other qualified professionals, and you should not use the information in place of a customized consultation with a licensed professional regarding your specific personal financial objectives, situation, and needs. We believe the information provided is reliable, but we do not guarantee its accuracy